The afternoon sun slanted through the dusty windows of Elena's electronics, casting long shadows across workbenches cluttered with the guts of radios, televisions, and communication equipment. Elena Vasquez wiped her hands on a grease-stained rag, surveying the 1943 Bendix military radio that had been giving her trouble for the past 3 hours. The unit belonged to old Mr. Henderson, a World War II veteran who brought it in with tears in his eyes, explaining it was the last thing he had of his father's service. Elena understood the weight of such objects. She'd spent the last 12 years in the small Arizona border town of Copper Ridge, building a reputation as the woman who could fix anything with circuits. The locals knew her as the quiet electronics expert, who never asked questions about where equipment came from and never charged veterans full price. What they didn't know was that before she became Elena, the repair shop owner, she had been Sergeant Elena Vasquez, communications specialist for a classified military unit that officially never existed. She adjusted her magnifying lamp and peered at the radio's internal components. The vacuum tubes were original, but someone had attempted amateur repairs over the decades, creating a maze of mismatched wiring that would challenge even her considerable skills. Elena had learned electronics in the Army, but she'd perfected her craft in the shadows, maintaining equipment for operations that left no paper trail. The radio's chassis was more corroded than she'd initially thought. Elena reached for her soldering iron, then paused. Something about the unit's frequency range caught her attention. This wasn't just a standard military radio, the modification suggested. It had been used for long-range intelligence gathering. Her pulse quickened as she recognized the telltale signs of encryption hardware that had been removed, leaving only the mounting brackets and severed connections. Elena's hands moved with practiced efficiency, replacing corroded capacitors and rewiring the damaged circuits. As she worked, muscle memory took over the same precise movements she'd used to maintain communication equipment in hostile territory, often while under fire. Her fingers found the rhythm they'd learned in places that didn't appear on any map, during missions that were never officially acknowledged. 3 hours later, she was ready for the moment of truth. Elena connected the radio to her test antenna, a rare sophisticated setup that most people assumed was for her ham radio hobby. In reality, it was capable of monitoring frequencies across multiple bands, a habit she'd never been able to break from her operational days. She powered up the Bendix radio, and static filled the small shop. Elena fine-tuned the frequency, listening for the clear tone that would indicate successful restoration. The static cleared, and suddenly voices emerged from the speaker fragments of conversation from various operators across the Southwest. Weather looking good for the morning run. Copy that. Roadrunner base. We're 20 minutes out. Elena smiled, satisfied with her work. The radio was functioning perfectly. She reached for her logbook to document the repair when another transmission cut through the chatter, clearer and more urgent than the others. Nightingale units. This is Mockingbird Base. Emergency frequency check. Respond with status. Elena's blood turned to ice. Nightingale was her unit's designation. Mockingbird Base had been their command center. Both had been buried in classified files 12 years ago, along with the official records of everyone who had served with them. Without thinking, her training kicked in. Elena's hand moved to the microphone, and she responded with the automatic precision drilled into her during countless operations. Mockingbird Base, this is Nightingale 7. Radio check, 5x5. Standing by for instructions. The words left her mouth before her conscious mind could stop them. Elena stared at the microphone in horror, realizing what she'd just done. Nightingale 7 was her call sign, her identity from a life she'd spent 12 years trying to forget. A life that had officially ended in a firefight in the mountains of Bosnia, where her entire unit had been declared killed in action. The radio crackled with static, then silence. Elena's hand shook as she reached to turn off the unit. But before she could, another voice responded, one that made her heart stop. Nightingale 7, this is Nightingale 3. Confirm your position. We've been waiting for you. Elena stumbled backward, knocking over her chair. Nightingale 3 was Marcus Chun, her unit's demolitions expert. She had watched him die, had held pressure on his wounds as he bled out in a bombed-out building in Sarajevo. She had carried his dog tags back to base and had attended his memorial service. Dead men don't send radio transmissions. Elena's mind raced through possibilities. Someone was using their old call signs, but how? The encryption protocols, the frequency assignments, even the voice patterns, everything was too accurate to be coincidence. Either someone had access to highly classified information, or the impossible was happening. She grabbed her emergency scanner and began monitoring multiple frequencies simultaneously. Within minutes, she detected movement on channels that had been dark for over a decade. Coded transmissions using protocols she recognized. Tactical communications that followed patterns her unit had developed through years of operations. Elena's hands moved automatically, setting up recording equipment and signal analysis software. Even as part of her mind reeled from the implications, her training took over. She began documenting everything: frequencies, transmission times, signal strength, and most importantly, the content of the communications. What she heard made her blood run cold. The transmissions weren't random chatter. They were coordinated, professional, and they were planning something. References to packages, delivery schedules, and border crossings painted a picture of a major operation in progress. Someone was using her unit's communication protocols to coordinate what sounded like smuggling activities along the Mexican border. Elena checked her watch. The transmissions had been going on for 17 minutes since her accidental response. In the intelligence world, 17 minutes was an eternity. If anyone was monitoring these frequencies, and someone always was, they would have already triangulated her position. She moved to her front window and peered through the blinds. Copper Ridge's main street looked normal. A few pickup trucks, Mrs. Garcia walking her dog, teenagers hanging around the gas station. But Elena's trained eye caught details others would miss. The blue sedan parked across from the post office had been there when she'd arrived this morning, but now it had different occupants. The man reading a newspaper at the bus stop had been holding the same page for the past 10 minutes. Elena's survival instincts, dormant for 12 years, roared back to life. She had maybe 20 minutes before they moved in, assuming they were still trying to confirm her identity. If they were certain she had less dot, she began moving with the efficiency of someone who had planned for this moment, even while hoping it would never come. Elena pulled up a loose floorboard behind her workbench, revealing a waterproof case she'd hoped never to open again. Inside were items from her previous life, encrypted communication devices, emergency cash in multiple currencies, false identification documents, and a Sig Sauer P226 that she'd maintained religiously despite never expecting to use it again. As she checked the weapon's action, Elena's radio crackled again. All Nightingale units. This is Mockingbird Base. We have a security breach on the emergency frequency. Initiate Protocol 7 immediately. Elena's blood turned to ice. Protocol 7 was their unit's emergency extraction procedure, used only when operations were compromised beyond recovery. It meant that whoever was using their communications knew not just their call signs and frequencies, but their most classified operational procedures. She grabbed her go bag from its hiding place and began shutting down her equipment. As she worked, Elena caught a glimpse of movement outside. The blue sedan was gone, but now there were two men in casual clothes walking slowly down the street, their eyes scanning building numbers. Elena Vasquez, small-town electronics repair shop owner, was about to disappear forever. The question was whether Nightingale 7 could survive long enough to find out who was using her dead unit's identity, and why they wanted her to know about it. The hunt was about to begin. Elena's hands moved with mechanical precision as she wiped down surfaces and destroyed anything that could provide forensic evidence. 12 years of careful anonymity were about to evaporate, but her training demanded she leave nothing useful behind. She had perhaps 10 minutes before the surveillance teams tightened their perimeter. The bell above her shop door chimed, and Elena's hand instinctively moved toward the concealed weapon at her back. Through the security mirror angled above her workbench, she saw a tall man in his 50s enter, moving with the controlled gait of someone accustomed to command. He wore civilian clothes, khakis, and a polo shirt, but his bearing screamed military officer. Elena didn't need to see his face to know who he was. She'd recognize that posture anywhere. "We're closed," she called out, not turning around, continuing to pack her emergency kit. "I know you are." Nightingale 7. The voice confirmed her worst fears. Commander James Mitchell, a former handler, the man who had recruited her into the shadows and who had written her death certificate 12 years ago. Elena slowly turned to face him, her hand still within reach of her weapon. Mitchell looked older, grayer around the temples, but his steel blue eyes held the same calculating intelligence she remembered. He stood near the door, hands visible, making no threatening moves. Between them lay 12 years of secrets and a betrayal that had cost her everything she'd once been. "Hello, James." Elena's voice was steady, professional. "I was wondering when you'd show up. You made quite a splash with that transmission." Mitchell's eyes swept the shop, taking in the sophisticated equipment, the organized workspace, the subtle security measures. "Nice setup. Very thorough. I'm impressed you managed to stay hidden this long." "Not hidden enough, apparently." Elena continued packing, her movements deliberate. "What do you want?" "The same thing you want answers." Mitchell stepped deeper into the shop, and Elena noticed he favored his left leg slightly. An old wound, probably from the same operation that had supposedly killed her. "Someone's been using your unit's communication protocols for the past 3 weeks. Tonight was the first time anyone responded to the call signs." Elena paused in her packing. 3 weeks? How long have you been monitoring?" "Since the first transmission." Mitchell moved to her workbench, examining the restored Bendix radio. "ANSA picked up the signals, flagged them as anomalous. When they ran the encryption patterns through their database, some very interesting flags went up. Flags that led to files that are supposed to be buried so deep they'd need archaeological equipment to find them. And they sent you to investigate." "They didn't send me anywhere. I'm retired, remember? Officially, I've been growing tomatoes in Virginia for the past 8 years." Mitchell's smile was grim. "Unofficially, I still have friends who ask favors. When they told me someone was using Nightingale protocols, I volunteered for this particular road trip." Elena studied his face, looking for tells, for signs of deception. Mitchell had always been hard to read, but she'd learned to spot his patterns during their years of working together. Right now, he seemed genuinely puzzled, which was almost more disturbing than if he'd been lying. "You wrote my death certificate," Elena said quietly. "You attended my funeral. You gave my mother a folded flag and told her I died serving my country. Because you did die." Mitchell's voice carried an edge of old pain. "Elena Vasquez, communications specialist, died in that building in Sarajevo along with the rest of Nightingale unit. What walked out of there was someone else entirely. Someone you created, someone the situation demanded." Mitchell picked up a circuit board from her workbench, examining it with the eye of someone who understood electronics. The mission went sideways. Intelligence was compromised. Half the unit was dead, the other half was blown. We had 2 choices: extract you and blow the entire operation, or make you disappear and salvage what we could. Elena's jaw tightened. You made that choice for me. I made the choice that kept you alive. Mitchell set down the circuit board and met her eyes. The people we were hunting didn't just want to kill you, Elena. They wanted to take you apart piece by piece until you gave them everything you knew about our operations. Making you officially dead was the only way to take you off their radar. And now I'm back on it. In a big way. Mitchell pulled out a tablet and showed her a series of signal analysis charts. These transmissions aren't random. Someone's coordinating a major operation using your unit's protocols. They know frequencies, encryption keys, tactical procedures that were never written down anywhere. The only people who should have this information are dead. Elena studied the data, her trained eye picking out patterns in the signal traffic. The communications showed a level of sophistication that made her stomach clench. This wasn't some amateur operation stumbling across old military equipment. How many people knew our protocols? She asked. Your unit, me, and maybe 3 people up the chain of command. All of whom have been thoroughly investigated. Mitchell's expression darkened. Elena, there's something else. The voice analysis on tonight's transmissions, the person who responded as Nightingale 3? It's a 97% match for Marcus Chun. Elena's blood turned to ice. That's impossible. I watched Marcus die. I know. I was there too, remember? I helped carry his body out. Mitchell's voice was grim. But voice analysis doesn't lie. Either someone has technology we've never seen before, or Marcus Chen is alive. The implications hit Elena like a physical blow. If Marcus was alive, if any of her unit had survived, then everything she believed about that night in Sarajevo was wrong. The mission that had destroyed her life, the betrayal that had forced her into hiding, all of it might be based on lies. Who else? Elena's voice was barely a whisper. Mitchell consulted his tablet. We've identified voice patterns consistent with 3 members of your unit. Marcus Chen, Sarah Rodriguez, and David Kim, all supposedly killed in action 12 years ago. Elena sank into her chair, the weight of revelation crushing down on her. 3 of her teammates, people she'd mourned, people she'd carried guilt about for over a decade, might be alive. But if they were alive, why were they using their old protocols? Why were they operating without authorization? And why had they waited 12 years to surface? There's more, Mitchell continued. The operation they're coordinating, it's big. We're talking about moving significant assets across the border, probably tonight. The timing of your accidental transmission wasn't coincidence. They've been waiting for you to respond. Waiting for me? Why? Because you're the key. Mitchell's expression was deadly serious. Your unit's communication protocols were designed with a failsafe. If the unit was compromised, if members were captured or turned, there was a way to lock them out of the system. But it required authorization from the unit's senior communications specialist. Elena's mind raced through the implications. You're saying they need me to complete whatever they're planning. I'm saying they've been running a sophisticated operation for weeks. But they can't access the highest level protocols without your authorization codes. Codes that only you know. Elena stood up, pacing to the window. The street outside looked normal, but she knew that was an illusion. Somewhere out there, her supposedly dead teammates were planning something that required her participation. The question was whether they were victims or perpetrators. What do you want from me, James? I want you to help me find them. Mitchell's voice carried the weight of old command authority. Whatever they're planning, it's happening tonight. We have maybe 6 hours to figure out what's going on and stop it before people get hurt. Elena looked at the man who had shaped her life, destroyed it, and now wanted to drag her back into the shadows. Outside, she could see the surveillance teams moving into position. Her quiet life in Copper Ridge was over, whether she helped Mitchell or not. The only question was whether she'd face what was coming as Elena Vasquez. Small-town repair shop owner, or as Nightingale 7, the ghost who'd never really died. She made her choice. Elena grabbed her emergency kit and headed for the back of the shop. We have maybe 3 minutes before they close the perimeter. There's a tunnel system under the building, old mining shafts from when this was a copper town. Mitchell followed her through the cluttered storage room to what appeared to be a solid wall. Elena pressed a sequence of points on the seemingly random arrangement of electrical boxes, and a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a narrow passage carved into living rock. "Impressive," Mitchell said as they descended into the tunnel. "How long did this take you to build?" "I didn't build it. I just improved it." Elena's voice echoed off the stone walls as she led them deeper underground. The whole town sits on a network of mining tunnels from the 1890s. I spent 12 years mapping them, installing emergency supplies, creating exit points. Old habits. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber where Elena had established a secondary communications post. Banks of radio equipment lined the walls, powered by a combination of solar batteries and a small generator. Multiple antenna feeds snaked up through concealed shafts to the surface. "You've been monitoring," Mitchell observed, noting the sophisticated setup. "Always." Elena powered up the equipment, and immediately the chamber filled with the chatter of multiple radio frequencies. "I've been tracking unusual activity for weeks, but I thought it was cartel communications. The encryption was too good, too professional for local smugglers." Elena's fingers flew across the controls, isolating the frequencies where she detected the Nightingale protocols. Within minutes, she had locked onto active transmissions. "Mockingbird Base. This is Nightingale 3. Package is secure and ready for transport. Estimate arrival at Checkpoint Charlie in 40 minutes. Elena's hands trembled as Marcus Chun's voice filled the chamber. Even through the electronic distortion, she could hear the familiar cadence, the slight accent that betrayed his Korean heritage. It was definitely Marcus, but something was wrong. His voice carried a tension she'd never heard before, an edge that spoke of desperation or fear. "Copy, Nightingale 3. Nightingale 5, what's your status?" Sarah Rodriguez's voice responded immediately. "Perimeter is secure. No sign of federal surveillance. We're clear for the next phase." Elena closed her eyes, overwhelmed by hearing voices from her past. Sarah had been the unit's sniper, a woman who could put a bullet through a quarter at 800 yards. She'd also been Elena's closest friend, the person who'd helped her through the nightmares that came with their line of work. "Elena." Mitchell's voice was gentle but urgent. "We need to focus." "What are they talking about?" "What's Checkpoint Charlie?" Elena forced herself to concentrate, analyzing the tactical communications with professional detachment. Checkpoint Charlie was our designation for the primary extraction point during border operations. It's about 20 miles northeast of here, in the desert near the old copper mine. What kind of package would they be transporting? Before Elena could answer, another voice joined the transmission, one that made her blood run cold. "All Nightingale units, this is Nightingale 1. We have confirmation that Nightingale 7 is active and in the area. Adjust timeline accordingly. Package delivery is now priority alpha." Elena staggered backward. Nightingale 1 was Captain David Kim, her unit commander. The man who'd trained her, who'd saved her life more times than she could count, who'd been like an older brother to her. But there was something in his voice that chilled her, a coldness that hadn't been there 12 years ago. "They know you're here," Mitchell said grimly. "Whatever they're planning, your presence has accelerated their timeline." Elena began recording the transmissions while simultaneously running signal analysis. "I'm triangulating their positions. If I can get enough data points." She paused, studying the readouts. "James, this doesn't make sense. The signal strength suggests they're operating from multiple locations, but the coordination is too tight. They'd need line-of-sight communication or a relay system. What kind of relay system? Elena's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up topographical maps and overlaying them with signal data. There. She pointed to a cluster of readings on the screen. They're using the old mining equipment as signal boosters. The metal infrastructure in those abandoned mines creates perfect relay points for encrypted communications. Mitchell studied the map. That's a lot of territory to cover. How do we narrow it down? We don't need to. Elena's voice carried a new determination. I know where they're going. Checkpoint Charlie isn't just an extraction point. It's where we cached emergency supplies during our original operations. If they're planning something big, they'll need those resources. Elena began packing portable communication equipment. But first, we need to know what we're walking into. I'm going to try something that might get us killed. She adjusted her radio to the Nightingale command frequency and picked up the microphone. Mitchell grabbed her wrist. Elena, if you transmit again, you'll give away our position. They already know I'm here. Elena's eyes were hard with resolve. But they don't know what I know. Time to find out whose side they're really on. She keyed the microphone. Nightingale 1. This is Nightingale 7. I'm alive, I'm listening, and I want answers. The response was immediate. David Kim's voice, but with an undertone of something that might have been relief or might have been fear. Nightingale 7. Thank God. We've been trying to reach you for weeks. We need your help. Help with what, David? And why are you using our old protocols for what sounds like a smuggling operation? A long pause, then. It's not what you think, Elena. We're not the bad guys here. We're trying to stop something terrible from happening, but we need your authorization codes to access the equipment we cached. Elena's mind raced. The David Kim she'd known would never have operated without authorization, would never have used classified protocols for unauthorized missions. But the voice was definitely his, and the desperation seemed genuine. What equipment? What are you trying to stop? Not over the radio. Too many people listening. Can you meet us at the old cache site? Come alone, and we'll explain everything. Mitchell was shaking his head vigorously, but Elena was already calculating distances and travel times. I'll be there in 2 hours. Elena, no. Bring your friend with you, the one who's been tracking us. We know about Commander Mitchell. We need to talk to both of you. Elena's blood chilled. If they knew about Mitchell, they'd been watching for longer than anyone realized. This wasn't a chance encounter or a coincidental discovery. This was a carefully orchestrated operation, and she was walking into the center of it. How do I know this isn't a trap? David's voice carried a note of old pain. Because 12 years ago, you saved my life in that building in Sarajevo. You carried me out when you could have saved yourself. I've never forgotten that debt, Elena. I'm trying to repay it now. Elena stared at the radio, her mind reeling. David's version of events didn't match her memories. In her recollection, David had been killed in the initial explosion. She'd never carried him anywhere. Either her memories were wrong, or someone was playing an elaborate game with information that should have died with her unit. 2 hours, she repeated. Then cut the transmission. Mitchell was already checking his weapon. This is insane. We're walking into an obvious trap. Maybe. Elena shouldered her equipment pack. But if there's even a chance my team is alive and in trouble, I have to try. Besides, we're not walking into anything blind. She pulled up a detailed map of the cache site on her tablet. I know that terrain better than anyone. If it is a trap, we'll see it coming. As they prepared to leave the underground chamber, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to discover truths that would shatter everything she thought she knew about her past. The question was whether those truths would save lives or destroy them. The hunt for answers was about to become deadly. The desert night was crisp and clear as Elena and Mitchell approached the cache site through a maze of abandoned mining equipment. Elena moved with the fluid precision of someone who knew every rock and shadow, while Mitchell followed, his military training evident in his careful placement of each step. They'd left their vehicle 2 miles back, approaching on foot to avoid detection. The old copper mine stretched before them like a metallic graveyard. Rusted conveyor belts snaked between towering ore processors, and abandoned buildings dotted the landscape like broken teeth. Elena had chosen this location 12 years ago because the metal infrastructure would mask electronic signatures and provide multiple escape routes. Now, those same advantages worked against them. Movement? 2 o'clock, Mitchell whispered into his throat mic. Elena adjusted her night vision scope and spotted the figure immediately. That's Sarah. She's in Overwatch position, just like I taught her. Elena's voice carried a mixture of pride and apprehension. If she wanted us dead, we'd already be down. They continued their approach, following a predetermined route that Elena had memorized years ago. As they drew closer to the main cache building, Elena's radio crackled with a familiar voice. Nightingale 7, this is Nightingale 1. We see you. Come to the main processing building, 2nd floor. Come armed but weapons lowered. Elena and Mitchell exchanged glances. It was a reasonable compromise, acknowledging the danger while showing limited trust. They made their way through the maze of equipment to a concrete building that had once housed the mine's administrative offices. The interior was exactly as Elena remembered it, stripped, bare except for the hidden cache she'd installed in the basement. But as they climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor, Elena noticed subtle changes. Fresh footprints in the dust, recently disturbed equipment, the faint smell of gun oil and electronics. David Kim stood in the center of what had once been the mine supervisor's office. He looked older, scarred, with a haunted quality in his eyes that Elena didn't remember. But it was definitely David, the same stance, the same way of holding his head when he was thinking. Elena. His voice carried 12 years of pain and relief. I wasn't sure you'd come. I wasn't sure you were real. Elena kept her weapon lowered but ready. The last time I saw you, you were bleeding out in a bomb building in Sarajevo. I was. You saved my life. David's eyes never left hers. You and Marcus carried me out of that building while Sarah provided cover. Don't you remember? Elena's world tilted. Her memories of that night were crystal clear. David had died in the initial explosion. Marcus had been shot by snipers. Sarah had been captured. She'd escaped alone, wounded and traumatized, carrying their dog tags as proof of their deaths. That's not what happened, Elena said slowly. You all died. I watched you die. No, Elena. Marcus Chun emerged from the shadows, moving with a slight limp, but very much alive. We all made it out. Barely, but we made it. The question is, what did they tell you happened? Elena's mind raced through the implications. If her teammates had survived, if her memories were wrong, then everything about her extraction and subsequent hiding had been based on lies. But why would Mitchell have lied to her? She turned to look at her former handler, and the expression on his face told her everything she needed to know. Mitchell's hand was moving slowly toward his weapon. James? Elena's voice was deadly quiet. What did you tell me happened that night? Elena, these people are not your teammates. Mitchell's voice carried the authority of command, but Elena could hear the strain underneath. They're enemy agents using sophisticated technology to impersonate your unit. Voice synthesis, facial reconstruction, psychological manipulation. Bullshit. Sarah Rodriguez stepped into the room, her sniper rifle trained on Mitchell. Elena, look at me. Really, look. Do you see anything artificial? Any signs of surgery or reconstruction? Elena studied Sarah's face with the trained eye of someone who'd learned to spot deception in a dozen different ways. The scars were right, a small one above her left eyebrow from a training accident, another on her chin from childhood. The way she held her rifle, the slight cant to her head when she was concentrating, everything was exactly as Elena remembered. The voice analysis was accurate, Elena said slowly. These are my teammates. Which means... She turned back to Mitchell, pieces of a 12-year-old puzzle finally clicking into place. You lied to me about what happened that night. Mitchell's facade cracked. Elena, you don't understand the bigger picture. Your unit stumbled onto something they shouldn't have seen. Something that threatened national security. What did we see, James? David's voice was hard with old anger. What was worth destroying our lives over? You discovered that certain elements within the intelligence community were facilitating arms sales to both sides of the Balkan conflict, prolonging the war for profit. Mitchell's hand was now resting on his weapon. You were going to expose operations that were vital to American interests. Elena felt the ground shift beneath her feet. So you decided to eliminate us. I decided to neutralize the threat while preserving valuable assets. Mitchell's mask was completely gone now, revealing the cold calculation underneath. Elena, you were too valuable to lose. Your skills, your loyalty, I knew I could redirect them. The others were expendable. Expendable. Marcus's voice was flat with rage. You left us to die in that building. I left you to be captured and interrogated. The plan was for you to die under questioning, taking your knowledge with you. Mitchell's weapon was now halfway drawn. Elena's extraction was always the priority. Elena's world crystallized with sudden, terrible clarity. The explosion that supposedly killed them, you triggered it. You were trying to eliminate witnesses to your arms-dealing operation. I was protecting American interests. Mitchell's gun cleared his holster, but Sarah's rifle was already trained on him. Elena, these people have been compromised. They've been working with cartels, using your unit's protocols to coordinate smuggling operations. They're not the people you remember. You're right, David said quietly. We're not the people we were 12 years ago. We've spent over a decade hunting the truth about what happened to us, about who betrayed us. We've done things we're not proud of, worked with people we shouldn't have trusted, all to get close enough to the truth to expose it. Elena's radio crackled with an incoming transmission. All units, this is Federal Task Force Alpha. We have the building surrounded. Lay down your weapons and surrender immediately. Mitchell smiled grimly. I called for backup before we entered the mine. Elena, you have one chance to walk away from this. Come with me now, and we can salvage your cover. Stay with them, and you'll go down as a traitor. Elena looked around the room at the faces of people she'd mourned for 12 years. Her teammates, her friends, her family, all alive, all scarred by the same betrayal that had destroyed her life. Outside, she could hear vehicles moving into position, the sound of tactical teams deploying. There's a third option, Elena said quietly. She moved to the room's main electrical panel and began connecting her portable communication equipment. Sarah, I need you to provide overwatch on the federal teams. Don't engage unless they breach the building. Marcus, David, help me set up a broadcast array using the mine's metal infrastructure. What are you doing? Mitchell demanded. Elena's fingers flew across her equipment, establishing connections to multiple frequency bands. I'm doing what we should have done 12 years ago. I'm telling the truth. She keyed her microphone and began broadcasting on every emergency frequency she could access. This is Sergeant Elena Vasquez, formerly Nightingale 7, broadcasting evidence of corruption within U.S. intelligence operations. As Elena began transmitting the recorded conversations and documented evidence her team had gathered over 12 years of investigation. Mitchell raised his weapon, but Marcus was faster, tackling the older man as his shot went wide. Outside, the federal teams hesitated as Elena's broadcast reached their communications. The truth transmitted on frequencies that couldn't be jammed or suppressed, began spreading across the intelligence community like wildfire. Elena smiled as she continued broadcasting. Nightingale Unit was finally completing their last mission, not as ghosts, but as the living witnesses to a betrayal that had cost too many lives. The song was ending, but the truth would echo forever.